Hello. Today I'm going to be doing some uh, reading ASMR. So we're going to be reading two essays from the Gender Reader. And this is going to be for my exam, but I thought it'd be nice to read it as an ASMR as well. So, yeah. Alright, let's start with the first essay, which is Sisterhood. In this essay, activist Gloria Steinem describes the changes that sisterhood brought about in her own life and the lives of other women. She describes sisterhood as a process that brings together women of different ages, races, and economic standing through discovery of their shared experiences as women. A very, very long time ago, about 3 or 4 years, I took a certain secure and righteous pleasure in saying things that women are supposed to say. I remembered with pain, my work won't interfere with marriage. After all, I can always keep my typewriter at home. Or, I don't want to write about women's stuff, I want to write about foreign policy. Or, black families were forced into matriarchy, so I see why black women have to step back and let their men get ahead. Or, I know we're helping Chicano groups that are tough on women, but that's their culture. Or, who would want to join a women's group? I've never been a joiner, have you? Or, when bragging, he says I write like a man. I suppose it's obvious from the kinds of statements I chose that I was secretly non-conforming. I wasn't married. I was earning a living at a profession that I cared about. I had basically, if quietly, opted out of the feminine role, but that made it all the more necessary to repeat the conventional wisdom, even to look as conventional as I could manage. If I was to avoid some of the punishments reserved by society for women who didn't do as society says, I therefore learned to Uncle Tom with subtlety, logic, and humor. Sometimes I even believed it myself. If it weren't for the women's movement, I might still be disassembling away. But the ideas of the great sea change in women's view of ourselves are contagious and irresistible. They hit women like a revelation, as if we had left a dark room and walked into the sun. At first, my discoveries seemed personal. In fact, the same ones so many millions of women have made are continuing to make. Greatly simplified, they go like this. Women are human. Women are human beings, first with minor differences from men that apply largely to the single act of reproduction. We share the same dreams, capabilities, and weaknesses of all human beings, but our occasional pregnancies and other visible differences have been used even more persuasively, if less brutally, than racial differences have been used to create an inferior group, an elaborate division of labor. The division is continued for a clear, if often unconscious, reason: the economic and social profit of males as a group. Once this feminist realization dawned, I reacted in what turned out to be predictable ways. First, I was amazed at the simplicity and obviousness of a realization that made sense at last of my life experience. I couldn't figure out why I hadn't seen it before. Second, I realized the new vision of life was from the system around us, and how tough it would be to explain this feminist realization at all, much less to people, especially though not only men, to accept such a drastic change. I try to explain, God knows, she knows, that women try. We make analogies with other groups that have been marked for subservient roles in order to assist blocked imaginations. We supply endless facts and statistics of injustice, reeling them off until we feel like human information retrieval machines. We lean heavily on the devices of reversal. If there is a male reader to whom my pre-realization statements seem perfectly logical, for instance, let him read each sentence with man substituted for woman, or himself for me, and see how he feels. My work won't interfere with marriage. Chicano groups are tough on men. You get the idea. We even use logic. If a woman spends a year bearing and nursing a child, for instance, she is supposed to have the primary responsibility for raising that child to adulthood. That logic by the male definition. But it often makes women feel children are their only function, keeps them from doing any other kind of work, or discourages them from being mothers at all. Wouldn't it be just as logical to say that the child has two parents, therefore both are equally responsible for child rearing? And the father should compensate for the extra year by spending more than half of the time caring for the children. Logic is in the eye of the logician. Occasionally, these efforts at explaining actually succeed. More often, I get the feeling that most women are speaking Urdu and most men are speaking Pali. I'm assuming what they're trying to say is that, like, they're from the same country. I believe Urdu and Pali are languages in India, and they're trying to state that, they're from the same place, but they speak completely different languages. So they're on the wrong page, essentially. Whether joyful or painful, both kinds of reaction to our discovery have a great reward. They give birth to sisterhood. First, we share the exhilaration of growth and self-discovery, the sensation of having the scales fall from our eyes, whether we are giving other women this new knowledge or receiving it from them. The pleasure for all concerned is enormous and very moving. In the second stage, when we're exhausted from dredging up facts and arguments for the men whom we had previously thought advanced and intelligent, we make another simple discovery. Women understand. We may share experiences, make jokes, paint pictures, and describe humiliations that mean little to men, but women understand. The odd thing about these deep and personal connections among women is that they often leap barriers of age, economics, worldly experiences, race, culture, and all the barriers that in male or mixed society seem so impossible to cross. I remember meeting with a group of women in Missouri who, because they had in equal numbers from the small town and from its nearby campus, seemed to be split between wives with white gloves welded into their wrists and students with boots who use words like imperialism and oppression. Planning for a child care center had brought them together, but the meeting seemed hopeless until 3 of the boot-younged women began to argue among themselves about a young male professor. The leader of the radicals on campus, he accused all women unwilling to run mimeograph machines of not being sufficiently devoted to the cause. As for the child care centers, he felt their effect of allowing women to compete with men for jobs was part of a dreaded feminization of the American male and American culture. "He sounds just like my husband," said one of the white-gloved women. "He wants me to bake sales and collect door-to-door for his Republican Party." The young woman had sense enough to take it from there. What difference did boots or white gloves make if they were all getting treated like servants and children? Before they broke up, they were discussing some subjects that affected them all, like the myth of the vaginal orgasm. Interesting. And planning to meet every week. Men think we're whatever it is we Men think we're whatever it is we do for men, explained one of the housewives. It's only by getting do for men. The wording's kind of weird. Oh, it's only by getting together with other women that we'll ever find out who we are. Even racial barriers become less formidable once we discover the mutuality of our life experiences as women. At a meeting run by Black women domestics who formed a co-meeting run by Black women At a meeting run by Black women domestics who formed a cooperative in Alabama, a white housewife asked me about the consciousness raising sessions, or rap groups, that are often an organic path to feminism. I explained that white men, even minority men, usually at some place, a neighborhood, a bar, a street corner, something where they could get together and be themselves. Women were isolated in their houses and families, isolated from other females. We had no street corners, no bars, no offices, no territory that was recognized as ours. Rap groups were an effort to create something of our own, a free place, an occasional chance for total honesty and support from our sisters. As I talked about isolation, about the feeling that there must be something wrong with us if we aren't content to be housekeepers and mothers, tears began to stream down the cheeks of dignified women, clearly as much of a surprise to her as us. For the Black woman, some distance was bridged by seeing this white woman cry. "He does this to us both, honey," said the Black woman next to her, putting her arm around her shoulders. "If it's your own kitchen or somebody else's, you still don't get treated like people. Women's work just doesn't count." The meeting ended with the housewife organizing a support group of white women who would extract from their husbands a living wage for domestic workers and help them fight the local authorities who opposed any pay raises. A support group without the domestic workers felt their small and brave cooperative could not survive. As for the matriarchal argument that I swallowed in pre-feminist days, I now understand why many Black women resent it and feel that it's the white sociologist's way of encouraging the Black community to imitate a white suburban lifestyle. "If I end up cooking grits for revolutionaries," explained a Black woman poet from Chicago, "it isn't my revolution. Black men and women need to work together. You can't have liberation for half a race." In fact, some Black women wonder if criticism of the strength they were forced to develop isn't a way to keep half the Black community working at lowered capacity and lower pay, as well as to attribute some of Black men's sufferings to Black women, instead of to their real source, white racism. I wonder with them. Looking back at all the male-approved things I used to say, the basic hang-up seems clear. A lack of self-esteem, or a lack of esteem for women, whatever our race, and for myself. This is the most tragic punishment that society inflicts on any second-class group. Ultimately, the brainwashing works, and we ourselves come to believe our group is inferior. Even if we achieve a little success in the world and think of ourselves as different, we don't want to associate with our group. We want to identify up, not down. Clearly, my problem with not wanting to join women's groups. We want to be the only woman in the office, or the only Black family on the block, or the only Jew in the club. The pain of looking back at wasted, imitative years is enormous. Trying to write like men, valuing myself and other women according to the degree of our acceptance by men, socially in politics, and in our professions. It's as painful as it is now to hear two grown-up female human beings competing with each other on the basis of their husband's status, like servants whose identity rests on the wealth or accomplishments of their employers. And this lack of self-esteem that makes us put each other down is still the major enemy of sisterhood. Women who are conforming to society's expectations view the non-conformance with justifiable alarm. Those noisy, unfeminine women, they say to themselves, they will only make trouble for us all. Women who are quietly non-conforming, hopefully nobody will notice, are even more alarmed because they have more to lose, and that makes sense too. The status quo protects itself by punishing all challengers, especially women whose rebellion strikes at the most fundamental social organization. The sex roles that convince half the population that its identity depends on being first in work or in war, and the other half that it must serve as docile, unpaid, or underpaid labor. In fact, there seems to be no punishment inside the white male club that quite equals the ridicule and personal viciousness reserved for women who rebel. Attractive or young women who act forcefully are assumed to be either unnatural or male-controlled. If they succeed, it could only have been sexually through men. Old women or women considered unattractive by male standards are accused of acting out of bitterness because they could not get a man. Any woman who chooses to behave like a full human being should be warned that the armies of the status quo will be treated as something of a dirty joke. That's their natural and first weapon. She will need sisterhood. Green tea goes pretty well with the reading. Okay. All that is meant to be a warning, but not a discouragement. There are more rewards than punishments. For myself, I now admit anger and use it constructively. Whether once I would have submerged it and let it fester into guilt, or collect for some disruptive explosion. I've met brave women who are exploring the outer edge of human possibility, with no history to guide them, and with courage to make themselves vulnerable. That I find moving beyond the words to express it. I no longer think that I do not exist, which was my version that lack of self-esteem afflicting many women. If male standards weren't natural to me, and they were the only standards, how could I exist? This means that I'm likely to need male values and approval, and I'm less vulnerable to classic arguments. If you don't like me, you're not a real woman, said by a man who is coming on. If you don't like me, you can't relate to other people. You're not a real person, said by anyone who understands a black male as an art. I can sometimes deal with men as equals and therefore afford to like them for the first time. I have discovered politics that are not intellectual or superimposed, they are organic. I finally understand why for years I explicitly identified with out groups. I belong to one, too, and I know that it will take a collection of such groups to achieve a society in which, at a minimum, no one is born into a second-class role because of visible difference, because of race, or of sex. I no longer feel strange by myself or with a group of women in public. I feel just fine. I am continually moving to discover I have sisters. I am beginning, just beginning, to find out who I am. the title of the essay makes perfect sense, which is sisterhood. The idea of finding, I guess, a group of people that have the same ideas, conforming to a more liberal view of how women should be, I guess. Like, this is a more liberal take into being more equal, essentially. And it makes perfect sense, you know, if you, just like what she said, if you put it in terms of men, men, it's so hard for men to do this, it's so hard for, or like men can't do this because of, women or not, hypothetically, then it makes sense why there is such a group. There is a group that is rebelling, that is talking with one another, and is having this idea that, wait a second, who am I? Do I exist or not? So it makes a lot of sense. I do see why why it's such an important topic to discuss. And I believe we have one more essay to read, which is the essay by White. His last name is White, or her last name is White. Edmund White. And the title is Sexual Culture, page 105. It's not too long either. All right. Let me just drink really quickly. It's pretty nice. Okay. Sexual Culture by Edmund White. In this essay, writer Edmund White challenges social assumptions about gay society. White attempts to define what it means to be gay, and he argues that sexuality alone cannot adequately define either gays or straights. His observations on both gay and straight culture are thought-provoking and controversial. So, in my exam, I need to read these two books, or these two essays, and compare and contrast them. How are they similar? How are they the same? So I think the similarities, I haven't read the second one, but after reading the second one, I think the similarities is going to be the fact that, it's like, they're kind of like divulging, deviating from the path, from the status quo, and forming their own groups. And I think the difference is going to be that they're talking about two different topics. One is talking about women's rights. The second is talking about the difference between gays and straights, I believe. Yeah. And saying that sexuality cannot be the defining factor for gays or straights. All right, let's start. Do gay men have friends? I mean, she said, are they friends with each other? Since the woman asking was a New Yorker, the owner of one of the city's simplest and priciest restaurants, someone who's known gays all her life. I found the question honest, shocking, and revealing of a narrow but bottomless abyss between us. Of course, New York is a city of total, even absolute strangers rubbing shoulders. The Hasidim in the yellow school bus being conveyed back to Brooklyn from the jewelry district, beards and black hats glimpsed through mud-splattered windows in sun-dimmed daguerreotype. It's a very interesting term. The junkie pushing the baby carriage and telling his wife, the prostitute, as he points to his tattooed biceps, I haven't partied in this vein for years. Moonies doing calisthenics at the midnight in their 8th Avenue Center, high above empty 34th Street. But this alienation wasn't religious or ethnic. The woman and I spoke the same language, knew the same people. We both considered Markella Hazen fun, but no substitute for Simone Beck. How odd that she, as lower upper middle class as I, shouldn't know whether gay men befriended one another. It was then that I saw how mysterious gay culture is. Not homosexuality, which is merely an erotic tropism, but modern American gay culture, which is a specific way of laughing, spending money, ordering priorities, encoding everything from song lyrics to mirror shiny military shoes. None of the usual modes for subcultures will do. For gay men are brought up by heterosexuals to be straight. They seek other men through what feels very much like compulsion, though they enter the ghetto by choice. Yet, once they make that choice, it reshapes their lives, even their bodies, certainly their wardrobes. Many gay men live among straights as Marranos, those Spanish Jews who pretended during the Inquisition to convert to Christianity but continued to observe the old rites in cellars when alone, in the greatest secrecy. Gays aren't like black or Jews, since they often are black or Jewish, and their affectional preference isn't a color or religion though it has spawned a culture, not unlike ethnic minorities. Few Jews have Christian siblings, but most gays have straight brothers and sisters, or at least straight parents. Many American Jews have been raised to feel they belong to the chosen people, at once superior and inferior to genitals. But every gay discovers his sexual nature with a combination of pain and relief, regret at being excluded from the tribe, but elation at discovering the solution to the puzzle. Okay, I don't really understand. I'm gonna have to go over what I just read, but it's a lot of interesting. The reading lifestyle is probably definitely high for this one. Gays aren't a nationality. They aren't Chicanos or Latin Americans or Irish Americans, but they do constitute one of the most potent political forces in big cities such as New York, Philadelphia, Washington, where gays and blacks elected Marion Barry mayor, Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, where gays are so numerous they've splintered into countless factions, including the Lesbians SM group, Samoas, and the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, a group of drag nuns, one of whose members ran a cowl and wimple as a candidate in the last citywide election. Okay. Not ethnic, but a minority. Not a plow, but political. Not a nationality, but possessed of customs, and pata. Not a class, but economic force. Not only as a market for records, films, vacations, and clothes, but also as an army of worker ants who, for better or worse, have gentrified the center cities, therefore creating a better tomorrow for single, young, white, heterosexual professionals. Imagine a religion one enters against one's parents' will and against one's own. Imagine a race one joins at 16 or 60 without changing one's hue or hair texture, unless at the tanning or beauty salon. Imagine a sterile nation without descendants, but with a long misty regress of ancestors, without an articulated self-definition, but with a venerable history. Imagine an exclusive club that includes a PR Puerto Rican boy of 16 wearing an ankle-high black and white Converse black basketball shoes and a patrol green shirt sawed off to reveal a Praxtolian stomach, and also includes a public relations WASP executive of 40 and his Prince of Wales plates and Cole Haan tasseled loafers. Okay. If one is gay, one is always in a crucial relationship to gayness. As such, a defining category that is so full it is nearly empty. Renaud Camus writes, homosexuality is always elsewhere because it is everywhere. No straight man can stand in rapt contemplation of his straightness unless he's an ass. To be sure, heterosexuals may wonder over the significance of their homosexual fantasies, though even that morbid exercise is less popular than now for merely. As Barbara Ehrenreich acutely observes in her new study of the heterosexual male revolt, The Hearts of Men, the emergence of gay liberation ended the period in which everyone suspected everyone else of being latently homosexual. Now there are open homosexuals and heterosexual men who are exempt from automatic suspicion or deviance. No homosexual can take this homosexuality for granted. He must sound it, palpate it, auscultate it as though it were the dead limb of a tree or the living but jerky limb of a body. Oh man. For that reason, all homosexuals are gay philosophers, in that they must invent themselves. At a certain point, one undergoes a violent conversion into a new state, the unknown, which one then sets about knowing as one will. Surely everyone experiences his or her life as an artifact, as molten glass being twirled and pinched into a shape to cool, or as a novel at once capacious and suspenseful. But no one is more a homo faber in the sense of both fabricator and fabulist than a homo. It would be vain, of course, to suggest that this creativity is praiseworthy, an ambition rather than a response. Sometimes I try to imagine how straights, not fundamentalists, know-nothings, not rural innocents, or Freudian bigots, but educated urban heterosexuals look at gay men. Do they even see lesbians? When they see gay men, what do they see? A mustache? A pumped-up body in black jeans and a tank top? An eye-catching tattoo? Braided rope around the biceps? What do they see? What do they think? They, in this case, hypocrite lecturer, being you. Do you see something at once ludicrous and mildly enviable in the still youthful but over-exercised body of this 40-year-old clone with the aggressive stare and soft voice? If you're a man, do you find so much preening over the appearance in a grown man, well, if not so offensive, at least unappetizing? Energy better spent on a career, on a family, on you? If you're a man, does it incense you that this jerk is out of harness, too loose, too free, has so lightly made a mockery of manhood? Once on a radio call-in, Showcop called in to tell me he had to admire the old style queens back when it was rough being queer. But that now, geez, these guys swapping spit, wit, a goal 1 week with the guy next, they're too lazy. They don't know the fine art of being a man. It's all just too easy. Oh my god, it's kind of hurting my neck. Like, the differences in like letterings and everything is it's quite interesting, I guess. Your sentiments, perhaps? Do you see gays as menacing satyrs, sex fiends, around whom it's dangerous to droop your soap, and as feeble sissies, frail-viewed nymphs locked within massive trunks and limbs? Or more positively, if just as narrowly, are you a sabaratic het who greets the sight of gays with cries of glee, convinced you've stumbled on Liberty Hall, where sexual license of every sort, including your sort, is bound to reign? In fact, such sobrieties often do regard gay men as comrades in arms, fellow libertines, and fellow victims in a country phobic to pleasure. Or do gays just irk you? Do you regard them as a tinsely distraction in your peripheral rhythm? As errant, obstinate atoms that can't be drawn into any of the into any of the usual social molecules? Men who, if they insist on their gayness, won't really do any of the solemnities, from dinner parties to debonnaide balls, all of which depend on strict gender dysmorphism for a rational seating plan. Since any of the proper gatherings require the threat of adultery for excitement and the prospect of marriage as justification, of what earthly use are gays? Even the few fearless straight gays who've invaded my gay gym drift toward one another, not out of soap-dropping panic, but because otherwise their dirty jokes fall on deaf or prettily blushing ears, and their taunting, butt-slapping mix of rivalry and comrade provokes a weirdly hostly or a still weirder thrill. Ooh. And now, how do gays look at straights? In Andrew Holleran's suburb new novel, Nights in Aruba, the narrator wonders what it would be like to be the head of a family, as if with all my problems would drop away, when in fact they would have merely been replaced by another set. I would not have worried about the size of my penis, the restrictions of age, the difficulty of finding love. I would have worried about mortgages, tuition, my youngest daughter's asthma, my competition at Shearson Roads. What makes this speculation so characteristically gay is that it is so focused on the family man, for if the 19th century Tartu required, even invented the convenient convent-bred virgin to contemplate, in the same way that the homosexual man today must insult and revere, mock and envy this purely imaginary bourgeois, pater familias, a creature extinct except in gay fantasies. Meanwhile, of course, the family man devotes his time to scream therapy and Tai Chi, kicking off personnels in the Village Voice, and wriggling out of the visits from his kids, two punked out teens who live in a feminist compound with his divorced wife, now a lesbian potter of great sensitivity and verve if low energy. Okay. I feel like I'm more focused on trying to correctly pronounce than actually understanding the book, but that's alright. I'll be able to. I'm able to pick up some of the ideas that the book wants me to understand. But for now, I'm just trying to read this as coherently as possible. So much for how two sexes, straight and gay, regard each other. If the cameras were to pull back and frame both worlds in the lenses, how would the two systems compare? The most obvious difference is that whereas heterosexuality does include two sexes, since homosexuality does not, it must improvise a new polarity moment by moment. Such a polarity seems necessary to sexual desire. At least it is constructed in our culture. No wonder that some gay men search out for the most extreme opposites, someone of a distant race, a remote language, another class or age. No wonder that even that convinced heterosexual Flaubert was finally able to unbind with a boy prostitute in Egypt, an exotic who provided him all the difference desire might demand. Other gay men seek out their twins, so that the beloved, I suppose, can stand in for oneself as one bows down to this false god and plays, in turn, his father, teacher, son, godfather, or god. Still, others institutionalize the polarity in that next best thing to heterosexuality, sadomasochism, the only vice that pathologizes all family and romantic relationships. Because every gay man loves men, he comes to learn at first hand how to soothe the savage beast of the male ego. No matter how passive or girlish or shy the new beau might be in the boudoir, he will become the autocrat of the dinner table. Women's magazines are always planning articles on gay men and straight women. I'd say what they have the most in common, aside from a few shared sexual techniques, is a body of folk wisdom about that hard head, that bully, that maddeningly self-involved creature, the human male. As studies have surprisingly shown, men talk more than women, interrupt them more often, and determine the topics of conversation and objective to women's assertions with more authority and frequency. When two gay men meet together, especially after the first romantic urge to oblige the other wanes, a struggle for conventional dominance ensues, in conflict only sympathetic of a larger argument over every issue, from where to live, how to, and whom to entertain. To be sure, in this way, the gay couple resembles the straight duo that includes an assertive, liberated woman. But while most of the young straight liberated women I know, at least, may protect their real long-range interests, such as career, motive life, emotional needs, with vigilance, they're still willing to accommodate him in little social ways essential to harmony. One beginning side of straight life is that women conceive of men as characters, as full-bodied, multifaceted beings who are first social, second familial, and third amorous or amicable, and only finally physical. I'm trying to politely say that women are lousy judges of male beauty. They're easily taken by such superficial traits as loyalty, dependability, charm, a sense of humor. Women don't, or at least didn't, judge men as much as so much beefcake. But men, both straight and gay, start with looks, the most obvious currency of value, worth, price. Let's say that women see men as characters in a long family novel in which the men are introduced complete with phrenology, genealogy, and one annoying and two endearing traits, where men see their partners, whether male or female, as cars, making to be instantly spotted, appraised, envied, made. A woman wants to be envied for her husband's goodness. his character, whereas a man wants to be envied for his wife's beauty, rarity, status, her drivability. Straight life combines the warmth and Kate of the 19th century bourgeoisies, the woman with the steely corporate ethos of the 20th century functionary, the man. If gay male life, freed of this dialectic, has become supremely efficient, the trapdoor beside the bed, and only momentarily intimidate a whole life cycle compressed into the one night stand, then the gain is dubious, albeit an extreme expression of one trend in our cultural economy. But of course, most morality, that is popular morality, not real morals, which are unaffected by consciousness, but mores, which are a form of fashion, is nothing but a species of nostalgia, a cover-up for pleasurable and profit, but not yet admissible innovations. If so, many people condemn promiscuity. They do so at least partly because there is no available rhetoric that could condone, much less glamorize, impermanence in love. Nevertheless, it strikes me that homosexuals, masters of improvisation, fully at home with the arbitrary and equipped with an internal compass that orients them instantly to any social novelty, are perhaps the most sensitive indicators of the future. The birth rate declines, the divorce rates climb, and popular culture, movies, television, song lyrics, advertisement, fashion, journalism, is so completely and irrevocably, but secularized that so-called religious revival is of no more lasting importance than fad for kabuki in a transistorized Japan. A temporary throwback, a slight break on the wheel. In such a world, the rate of change is so rapid that children, once they're in school, can learn from their parents, but must assimilate new forms of behavior from their peers and new information from their specialized instructors. As a result, parental authority declines and the demarcations between the generations become ever more formidable. Nor do the parents regret their loss of control, since they're devoting all their energy to cultivating the inner self in the wholesale transition of our society from an ethnic of self-sacrifice to one of self-indulgence. The so-called aristocratization of middle-class life that has dominated the peaceful parts of this century in the industrialized West. In the contemporary world, the 19th century experiment of compassionate marriage, never very workable, has collapsed utterly. The exact nature of the collapse isn't very clear yet because of our distracting, probably irrelevant habit of psychologizing every crisis, thus the endless speculations in the lowbrow press of the irresponsible male and the defeminized female, or the paradoxical and cruelly impractical advice to women readers to go for all family careers, marriage, romance, and the revives of solitude. We treat the failures of marriage as though it were failures of individuals to achieve it, a decline in grit or maturity, or commitment or stamina, rather than the unraveling of a poorly tied knot. Bourgeois marriage was meant to concentrate friendship, romance, and sex into an institution at once familial and economic. Once only the most intense surveillance could keep such a bulky, ill-assorted load from bursting at these seams. Once the hedonism of the 60s relaxed the tension, people began to admit that friendship tranquilizes sexual desires. When mates become siblings, the incest taboo sets in, and that romance is by its very nature evanescent through indefinitely renewable given an endless supply of fresh partners. Neither sexual nor romantic attractions, so capricious or passionate or unstable, could ever serve as the basis for an enduring relationship, which can be balanced only by the plenitude of esteem. That easy, undramatic, intimate kind of love, one would say, resembled family love if families were more loving. It is this love that many gay couples know about, aim for, and sometimes even express. If all goes well, two gay men will meet through sex, become lovers, weather the storms of jealousy and demulation of lust, develop shared interests, a hobby, a business, a house, or a circle, and end up with a long-term, probably sexless camaraderie that is not as disinterested as friendship, or as seismic, or as passion, or as charged with contradiction as fraternity. Younger gay couples feel that this sort of relationship, when it happens to them, is incomplete, a compromise, and they break up in order to find total fulfillment, tireless passion, elsewhere. But older couples stay together, cultivate their mild, reasonable love, and defend it against the ever-present danger of the sexual allure exercised by a newcomer. For the weak point of such marriages is the eternally recurring fantasy, first in one partner and then the other of total fulfillment. Needless to say, such couples can wreak havoc on the newcomer who fails to grasp that Bob and Fred are not just roommates. They may have separate bedrooms and regular extracurricular sex partners, or even bucks. But Bob monitors Fred's infatuations with an eye attuned to nuance, and at a certain point will intervene to banish a potential rival. I think most straight people would find these arrangements more scandalous than the infamous sexual hijinks of gays, because these arrangements have no name, no mythology, no public or private acknowledgement. They're almost invisible even to the participants. Thus, if you ask Bob in a survey what he wanted, he might say he wanted a real lover. He might also say Fred was just a roommate, my best friend. We used to be lovers. So much for explicit analysis. But over the years, Bob has cannily steered his affairs with Fred between the scala of excessive fidelity, which is financially so dull no too imaginative gay man could endure it, and the charybdis of excessive tolerance, which could leave both men feeling so neglected they'd seek love elsewhere for sure. There are, of course, countless variants to this pattern. The men live together or they don't. If they don't, they can maintain the civilized fiction of romance for years. They plan dates, honeymoons, take turns sleeping over at each other's house, and avoid conflicts about domestic details. They keep their extracurricular sex lives separate, and they agree not to snoop, or they have three-ways. One of the pairs has an active sex life, and other has abandoned the erotic arena. Are gay men friends with each other? The woman asked me. The question may assume that gays are only sexual, and that a man eternally on the prowl can never pause for mere affection, that a gay Don Juan is lonely. Or perhaps the question reveals a confusion about a society of one gender. Since a straight woman has other women for friends and men for lovers, my questionnaire might have wondered how the same sex could serve in both capacities. The first supposition, give me 1 second, it is getting a little bit hot in here. The first supposition, that gay men are only sexual, is an ancient prejudice, and like all prejudices, mostly untrue, but in one sense occasionally accurate. If politically conscious homosexuals prefer the word gay to homosexual, they do so because they want to make the world regard attraction to members of the same gender as an affectional preference as well as an sexual orientation. For instance, there are some gay men who prefer the feel of women's bodies to men's, who are even more comfortable sexually with women, but whose emotions crave contact with other men. Gay men have unfinished emotional business with other men, scary, promising, troubling, absorbing business, whereas their sentiments towards women, at least women not in their family, are much simpler, more stable, less fraught. Passionate affection, is never simple. It is built out of equal parts of yearning, fear, and appetite. For that reason, the friendship of one gay man fiercely drawn to another is as tense as any heterosexual passion, whereas a sexless, more disinterested gay friendship is as relaxed, as good-tempered as a friendship, say, between two straight men. Gay men, then, do divide other gays into two camps, those who are potential partners and those who are not, which are friends. But where gay life is more ambiguous than the other world at large, and possibly for that reason more baffling to outsiders, is that the members of the two camps, lovers and friends, are always switching places or hovering somewhere in the margin between. It is these unconfessed feelings that have always intrigued me the most as a novelist, the unspoken love between two gay men, say, who pretend they're just friends, cruising buddies, merely filling in until Mr. Right comes along. Mercifully, he never does. In one sense, the public prejudice about a gay obsession with sex is valid. The right to have sex, even to look for it, has been so stringently denied to gays for so many centuries that the drive toward sexual freedom remains a bright, throbbing banner in the fierce winds whipping over the ghetto. Laws against sex always created the biggest problems for homosexuals. They helped to define the very category of homosexuality. For that reason, the gay community, despite its invention of a culture no more than eroticized than any other, still cannot give up its origin in sexual desire and its suppression. But what about the excessive promiscuity of gay men? The infamous quickies, a phenomenon only temporarily held in checks by the AIDS crisis. Don't the quickies prove that gay men are essentially bizarre, fundamentally lacking in judgment, oversexed? Of course, gay men behave as all men would, were they free of their strictures of female taste, need prohibitions, and expectations. There is nothing in gay male life that cannot be attributed either to its minority status or to its all-male population. All male want quick, uncomplicated sexual adventures, as well as sustained romantic passion. In a world of all men, that desire is granted. This very universality of sexual opportunity within the modern gay ghetto has paradoxically increased the importance of friendship. In a society not based on the measured denial or canalization of sexual desire, there is more energy left over for friendship. Relationships are less loaded. Relationships are less loaded in gay life, hence the celebrated gay irony, a levity equivalent to seeing through conventions. In so many ways, gays are still prisoners of the dominant society, but in one way regard gays as freer than their jailers, because gay relationships are not disciplined by religious, legal, economic, and political ceremonies, but only by the dictates of consciousness and the impulses of the heart. They don't stand for anything larger. They aren't symbols, but realities, not laws, but entities sufficient unto themselves, not consensual, but static. And there we go. That is the ending of the second essay, and the second one was a lot more difficult to read. It was almost hurting my neck. It was hurting my neck because of the different, like the pacing and whatnot. Okay, but hopefully you should be asleep by now, and hopefully everything worked out. And yeah, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next video.